Yes, I'm going to use the ONS, Office for National Statistics case, as an illustration of a much wider phenomenon. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the background first. Stonewall, run a scheme called Diversity Champions. Organizations pay Stonewall an annual subscription to be included on their list of diversity champions published on their website. If you glance down that list, it gives you a sense of the degree of power and influence that Stonewall has amassed. To name a very few of the members, they include the House of Commons, the House of Lords, the Ministry of Justice, the Crown Prosecution Service, Public Health England, the GMC. In a way, most strikingly of all, the Equality and Human Rights Commission, the body that has the job of looking after the interests of all the protected characteristics, not just one or a minority of them. So in other words, not just Stonewall's constituency. Other members of Stonewall's champion scheme include over 50 local authorities and most of the country's police forces and universities. I've written more about the extent of that reach on the Legal Feminist blog, and I'll put, when I finish speaking, I'll put a link to that in the chat. But I want to pause at this point and make a little bit of a fuss about just how extraordinary the extent of this reach is. Stonewall is a lobby group. They succeed in getting their members, including you, the House of Commons and the House of Lords and other bodies, other major public bodies, to pay them to be lobbied. We at Sex Matters would love a deal like that. Except in truth, we wouldn't, because we do want to persuade you of things. We're in a sense, the same kind of business as Stonewall. But we don't want the kind of uncritical allegiance that something like the Stonewall Champion scheme fosters. We don't think it's democratic. So going back to the Stonewall scheme, the benefits of membership include discounted access to Stonewall training, coaching, mentoring services. One of the things that Stonewall trains its members on is the law. But Stonewall trains its members on the law as it would like it to be, not the law as it is. Stonewall and similar groups, and they're one of a cluster of groups campaigning on the same issues, I'm really using them as an example, have for years now been running a two-pronged campaign. On the one hand, they've been trying to change the law to make it much easier to get a gender recognition certificate, essentially on the basis of a declaration that you consider yourself to be of the opposite sex to your biological sex. And that's what's become known as the Campaign for Self-Identification, self-ID. But at the same time as trying to change the law to make it possible to get a GRC on the basis of self-ID, they're also telling anyone who will listen that for all practical purposes, self-ID is already the law. So they're trying to change the law on the one hand, and on the other hand, they're trying to persuade people that the law has already changed in the way that they want to change it. So for example, they're telling employers and service providers that trans people have a legal right to use the toilets and other single-sex facilities or services that align with their self-identified gender, whether or not they have a GRC. That's not true. It's a flat legal error, but it's very, very widely believed. And you'll find it in guidance produced by many official bodies. So many employers and organizations will be led astray by that. What these organizations are trying to do is, in effect, replace the biological concept of sex with something called gender identity. In other words, that's the replacement of an obvious and objectively verifiable fact about your body, your biological sex, with a wholly subjective and unverifiable claim about your inner self. So that's the background to the ONS judicial review brought earlier this month by the campaigning group Fair Play for Women, in which I was instructed on the council team. ONS had published guidance telling people that they could answer the sex question on the census in line with the sex given on any of their official documents. Now, on the face of it, that sounds fairly innocuous, your official sex. But the problem with that is that you can get your sex changed on your driving license and many other documents simply by asking. So the effect of that guidance was that ONS was saying you could answer the sex question on the census according to your gender identity. Fair Play for Women argued that that was unlawful. The census is tightly controlled by legislation, even down to the precise words of each question. They're all set out in a schedule to the regulations or the order. And the information that ONS had a duty to collect was sex, not gender identity. At a preliminary hearing on permission, Mr. Justice Swift agreed that Fair Play for Women had a strongly arguable case. He ordered the ONS to delete the guidance on an interim basis and listed the case for an urgent hearing on full merits the following week. And at that point, ONS threw in the towel and agreed to a final order declaring that sex meant biological sex, except where there was a gender recognition certificate. This is how the ONS itself put the importance of sex data in a 2016 report. I'll just leave you a moment to read that. So in other words, sex is an incredibly important aspect of the kind of data that ONS collects. Biological sex affects all kinds of things: lifespan, resistance to disease, earnings, educational outcomes, consumer preferences, criminality. The list is endless. All of those things, almost all of those things are affected by sex, not gender. Trans-identifying males don't gain female advantages in longevity. They don't lose their athletic advantage over women. They might lose a little bit of their athletic advantage over women if they suppress their testosterone and take cross-sex hormones, but they certainly don't lose the whole advantage of having gone through male puberty. They don't swap their risk of prostate cancer for a risk of cervical cancer, and so on. They remain physiologically male. And a lack of accurate sex disaggregated data makes it harder to identify and address systematic inequality. So this is absolutely core to the job that the ONS has to do. And by blurring those boundaries, ONS wasn't doing its job properly. This chart from the Ministry of Justice provides a very striking example. Men are 49% of the population of the UK, but we can see from this that they account for 84% of prosecutions for offences of violence and fully 98% of sexual offences. And when you look at numbers of sex offenders in prison, they're even more starkly divided. 125 women compared to 13,359 men. So women are just under 1% of the total prison population for sex offenders. What that means is that if sex crimes committed by trans women start being recorded in official statistics as committed by women, that will have a negligible effect on the total number of sex crimes apparently committed by men, but an enormous impact on the numbers apparently being committed by women. They're likely to double or more. The ONS sets the gold standard for data integrity in the UK, and the census once every 10 years is its flagship operation. Where the ONS leads, many other agencies can be expected to follow. You might hope that the ONS would be staffed and run by the sort of people who would care about data integrity more than they do about their own grandmothers. In my view, it's hard to overstate how shocking it is that the ONS of all public bodies was prepared to trash the integrity of data about sex for political expediency in this way. It may not surprise you to learn at this point that ONS is a Stonewall champion. Thank you.